You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. We're the show where we're going to try to help you, if you're in some form of leadership or authority, help you be a better leader. And today we're going to lean in to a topic that I have kind of tangentially referenced in prior episodes. I've told the story of my early days as a banker, working with business owners and watching the trajectories of their companies. And inevitably, somewhere in that path, there's a tipping point that has to do with the founder's ego. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or a healthy understanding of your own ego, as a business grows, there are choices that have to get made. And if your ego's not going to let you make those choices, then you're probably going to have a problem with your business. But all of that said, I want to introduce my guest. His name is Josh Greco. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug. So excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, give us a little bit of background and help the listeners understand how you might be the guy we should be talking to about this ego trip thing we might have.
Yeah, well, it's been a journey. Let's start with that. But I have a wide range of business experience that led me to a path of really reflecting about what I wanted in my life, and led me to coaching. So long story short, I've been a business coach for 5 years, and I wanted to earn a living by helping other people, much as yourself. And it's very rewarding. And also you notice a lot of things about yourself that you believe about yourself in that journey. And my clients oftentimes are my greatest teachers. As I go to coach them or to observe something about their lives, I notice, hey, maybe I should be following my own advice here. So my discovery of the ego and what it is, because there's so many misnomers and different definitions of what it actually is, really crunches down into the past couple of years. And I'm happy we can go in many different directions here. Maybe we should start with defining what our understanding of it, so that we could work from a place of shared agreement here. But it's so powerful. It's the most powerful thing I've ever studied and reflected upon myself. And I'm finding that there's other people that are really interested in this topic, because it releases them from their limitations and allows them to achieve the results that they really, really want in a very rewarding way.
Yeah, I think that would be great to get into that, because I do think probably the notion of ego gets a bad rap sometimes, because it's generally denoted or connoted as a negative, like, oh, he's got a wild ego, and that's the guy that, dominates the room and makes everybody feel bad. But I believe personally there's an element of ego that goes into having a level of confidence as a leader, being able to be confident up in front, standing on the podium or in front of your team, and exude purpose and direction for what you're doing. There's a little bit of ego involved in that. And again, that my definition is horribly unscientific, but tell us your understanding of the definition now that you've found it.
Yeah, so this is where we might have our first divergence here, which is okay, as we know as coaches. I like to think of ego as something that prevents me from being in my own authentic energy. And for whatever reason, right? So if a great example of me speaking in front of a group, I might be fearful of the way my content might be perceived, or the way that my mannerisms or my style of speech is perceived. Judgment is another way to put that. I might be judged. And so my ego might kick in to protect me and keep me safe. And that's my definition of the ego, is some sort of unconscious, unseeable. There's nothing you can, there's no tangible piece of the ego, but it's invisible. But it's a program that is working to keep you safe and prevent you from stepping into your authentic energy. And I might give you the opposite. So when you're in your authentic self, and we've all been there. Athletes might describe it as a state of flow. A speaker, just is in the zone. You don't really think about how you're coming off. You're speaking from your heart. And when people listen to an egoless speaker, I get emotional myself, but that's maybe because of the work that I've done. But you feel it from them. You feel it's something that it's coming from a place that maybe is higher than them or bigger than them, and they're almost like channeling or like connecting with something that's of a higher purpose. And that could be difficult to do. And I think the ego comes in and can sabotage the message that we want to share from our heart. And sometimes it can come out in different ways that maybe is not the best way that we want to be presented.
I like that, and I'm happy if that sounds like a contrarian statement for what I started with. But as you describe that, it makes a whole lot more sense to me now to think of it in those terms. And I fundamentally would tell you I have to agree. I know I myself have been, I call it a blessing on times past that I've been called to take a podium or deliver, a strategic planning, mission, vision, purpose thing. Being able to be in that zone and just not have much of a care in the world about that judgment you talked about, but just really lean into the message and the topic and be the channel for it to go out, and believing that it is a much bigger purpose than I might be individually. I think it is a wonderful place, and if you've ever experienced that, you'll know what we're talking about here. But I do like that idea. I mean, I know I'm reminded back in the day, Michael Jordan talked about frequently being in the zone, and when he would get into it, the game was just incredibly slow in his line of sight. And when you watched an NBA game in the days that he was playing, slow is not the word that came to mind. But he said that's how it manifested. He could see the passing lanes and he could see the movement, but it was like a slow motion movie in his mind. I thought, wow, what a contrast.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing is that sense of viewing things from a higher perspective is how I might say it. So sports reference is so easy, right? Because when you're in the zone, you see things unfolding before they're happening. Whereas if you can remember the first time that you played a sport, or if you go to play a sport that maybe you're not so good at right now, you're just trying to keep up. It's like, am I doing this right? Right? There's a lot of questions and you're questioning things and you're just like, I can't see things for what they are. But somebody like Michael Jordan is like, I know this guy's going here. I'm going to be here. He's already in the spot. Wayne Gretzky is another great hockey example because he's got that quote, go where the puck is going, not where it is right now. And so you operate from this place of, I don't know, it's like a higher lens or a greater vision, and you can anticipate and see things before they're or while they're happening and know where they're going. And it's like you get this extra sense, almost like an intuition when you're in that space.
Now, you've done some work with some assessment science that's helped people reveal their challenges in this space. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I work for an organization, umbrella company called Pro Advisor Coach. I'm on with them because I believe that I can build bigger and stronger together with the team. I still have my own autonomy as a business coach, able to set my own rates and schedule, but I have access to platforms and resources and other coaches who share this mission of bringing relief and eliminating suffering in the workplace. I love that. I love that mission statement. And so the company, the organization, actually the CEO, who's Rich Campy, owns the rights to this assessment called the MindScan assessment. And long story short, the science behind this assessment was created by a scientist in the 1970s. His name is Dr. Robert S. Hartman, who was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for his work in what's called formal axiology. And formal axiology is just a fancy term for the study of what is quote unquote good. So how would you define what is good? We could spend a whole episode on how you would define that. Is it comparison to something else? Is it good, better, best? Is there a best? Is there just an option that's better than the next thing? So there's a science that goes into it, and this assessment is really interesting because you're just ranking statements in order from what you would say good to worst or best to worst, and there's all different types of statements. So something like a good meal. Compared to like a devoted scientist? How would you even stack rank what's most important or what you value more? And the idea is that the experiences that you've been through in your life will make you determine what you think is better than something else. And as you answer these questions or rank these statements in order, it produces this really intuitive reflection on what your value system is or what you value in your thinking. And this is all at a subconscious level. So it's super informing. The results are all about you, and there's like visuals to help you understand what it is that you're really strong at and maybe you see really clearly, and then also what some opportunities are, maybe some blind spots for you.
Fascinating work. I can only imagine where that goes. What typically does someone learn from taking this assessment? What kind of debrief data points can they take away for their leadership development?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So, according to Dr. Hartman, the three ways to identify value are what he calls the intrinsic, the extrinsic, and the systemic. All right, so intrinsic is usually about our connectivity with people. That's why we do what we do to serve clients, and also the people in our organizations, in our company. So you might be high people, for example. That means you lean in with empathy. In order for you to feel good, people around you have to be good. And it also comes with some red flags or some warning signs. Maybe difficult conversations are hard for you, or firing an employee is something you don't want to do because you're so high empathy. And so you can be high or low in the three categories. And I've given away the first one, but intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic translates into what we call people, actions, and process, or also relator, doer, and thinker. So as a leader, anybody who takes this assessment cannot be high in all three. If you're focused on one or two, there's a dimension that is usually down. And not that that's a bad or a good thing. It's just an awareness tool of, hey, I'm systems focused with my people, and that just means I'm really slow to take action, or I'm very cautious when I take those actions because I'm focused on these other two. So it just tells the story of where your mind is, where your thinking goes, of what you value to be true. And that could be useful for a business owner, especially as you evolve in your understanding of these concepts, and maybe even work your way through, different roles that you might play in the company.
That's fascinating because I'm connecting some dots in my mind here as you describe that. I have for a long time in my own business advisory work had a framework of 4 pillars that make up every business: people, process, product, and performance. And performance is where we get into the financial metrics, KPIs, all of that, the measurement of success. But, the people, process, and product issues always come to bear one way or another. So from a leader perspective, it's how can you best operate? And what I'm thinking, I might be reaching a little too far, but tell me and bring me back if I'm missing this. If a leader knew their personal bent in those 3 categories that you described, and we overlay that on the essential elements of the business, there's likely a correlation of, for instance, if the leader's not good with people, that people pillar is going to suffer. And
Yes.
Could be a very direct correlation with how the leader shows up in the moment versus what the business needs to operate at its highest level.
And I'd take that a step further. So yes, I agree with that, Doug. And I'd say, if a leader is low on people, for example, or if they overlook the way that people feel when decisions are made or whatnot, they're probably really really good at or have a proficiency with the action or the process, right? They're focused on that, but when they push that thing, they overlook what could happen here, right? So as a leader, you want to be more well-rounded and just be more aware of how your actions or how your implementations are affecting people, and vice versa too, right? So if you're focused too much on the people, maybe you are slow to put into something, a change in the company that might actually serve the client better or help the company grow out of a fear of how the people might receive a change. And so these things all work together, right? So you want to understand,
Yeah,
like
I love
a
that.
high action could steamroll a person, right? But then vice versa, if you're high people, you might not take enough action. So they all kind of work in tandem with each other.
Well, and likewise, a corollary for a business owner or a senior leader in an organization, we get back to the ego thing. If you feel and experience a gap in one of your own abilities to make one area or another or multiple areas of your business perform, the willingness or unwillingness to hire somebody that knows how to do that,
Yeah.
to identify a people solution, another leader that could fill that gap and make things optimal. I did a show, it's been about 2 years ago now. There was a gentleman who had been part of a three-man partnership that had built a very successful restaurant chain out in California. They started with one and ended up with 100 before they sold the whole thing.
Wow.
But his story for the journey was at some pretty critical point, and it was kind of early, as I recall. Maybe they had like only 5 or 6 locations. They had established the mission vision they wanted, and they knew that was locked in, and they had created a culture that they could manage and nurture for the right service, the right food quality, et cetera. But they also realized they needed a CEO, and none of the three of them wanted to be that guy.
Yep.
And they had the collective wisdom and collective alignment of egos to say, for this company to grow, we need to go hire a CEO to be the guy.
Right.
We each can stay in our domains. I guess one was, you might call him the senior chef, another was the business guy, and the third one was the kind of people and culture person. But none of them felt they had the chops to really be a CEO of that whole enterprise. So they went out and
Sure.
recruited one, and the thing just skyrocketed.
Wow. Yeah. So what you're hitting on, maybe if I could piggyback on that, would be, the ego is about control in the way that I understand it, right? So if we're hanging on to something, it means we want to control something, and that's usually when our ego, rears its ugly head. Because, and there's no judgment, right? It as you alluded to earlier, it could be a good thing if you understand how it works. It's teaching you something about yourself. And so what these three gentlemen sound like they did well is set their egos aside, because if one of them stepped in and said, I don't want somebody from the out, this is our creation. I don't want somebody from the outside coming in and making the calls or taking the shots here, because this is our organization. They may have prevented this beautiful reality that they created with all these, 100 different locations. And so they had the wherewithal to recognize, I don't have that skill set. I'll set my ego aside. I'll release control, right? Because they have to report to this person, right? So part of their roles may have changed by this bringing this outside person, but there's always a path to do that. If you're okay with releasing control, just examining what part of the control you're most worried about, or like what is the fear if you were to bring on the CEO and then work through that. I'm not sure if they did that type of work, but it sounds like they had at least enough awareness to where this became a success for them.
Let me ask you this. Popular business buzzword of the last several years is this notion of emotional intelligence. Where does the work in emotional intelligence tie in or parallel what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's on the same plane, because there are emotional intelligence parallels with what the ego, like how it shows up within you. So I mentioned earlier the word sabotage. There's different sabotageurs. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to use that. But there's different identities for how it, there's a control sabotager. There's a hyper work sabotager. There's a people pleaser sabotager. So to understand, like, well, I'm back into my pattern. This is what I do. This is what, I feel safe when I do this. It's, I feel comfortable here, but it's really preventing you from, like we mentioned earlier, stepping into that authentic energy, because it's scary when you do it. There might be something that happens when you do it that you release control. Like there's an outcome that you can't control anymore if you're not a people pleaser. And so, emotional intelligence fits perfectly into the conversation with ego.
Well, and for most of the training I've had in the emotional intelligence realm, one of the key themes is just the simple notion of awareness. As a leader, you being aware and willing to open up and pay attention to feedback you might be getting or outcomes that are happening because of your own behaviors, your communication, your relationships with people, decision making, et cetera, et cetera. You're creating that elevated awareness is really a big part of the notion of climbing up the EQ scale is just being far more aware and I guess ultimately willing to do something about it. If what you look in the mirror and say to yourself as truth, beauty, and light, if that's not working out there in the world somehow, the enlightened leader will explore that, make an assessment, and agree to make some changes for the better.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I love that word awareness, because the ego works and operates in your unconscious. So as you become aware of it, you dissolve the program, or you begin the steps to dissolve the program. So one of my favorite coaching terms, reduce it to the ridiculous. I'll even knock down, I love the way you frame that, because just becoming aware and then doing something about it, I would actually almost even like to eliminate the doing something about it, because as you become more aware of it, you'll recognize I'm in the pattern again. I'm doing the same thing. I'm sabotaging. You'll reach a point to where you won't have a choice. Like if you want a new reality that's better for you, you'll end up doing something about it, just out of this motivation to change. So it doesn't have to be I got to do something, but I have to take this action. I'm going to force myself to do it. As you become more aware and recognize how often it is happening to you, it'll just naturally be like, I got to take the action. Like I'm ready, and I'm going to jump right in.
Well, I agree. And closely related to that is the notion that if you become informed that something about your behavior is not showing up for the greater good that you intend, and you make the change, it may be painful at first. It may have to exist in your, frontal cortex, where it's a logical choice that you do for a time force yourself to make for the greater good. But the repetition of doing that does create I call it the leadership muscle memory. You do exercise that in a way, just like athletes might, to perfect a pitching form or a shot form or a golf swing. You practice. You create that muscle memory, and pretty soon your body, your whole being has adopted the better behavior, and now you show up as a different kind of leader.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've referred to that as altering your micro decisions. So quite often we think they're these big, like world-changing things that we're doing, and they can be, but usually they're stacked on these micro decisions. So just making a very small, different decision in the moment than you normally would make. And then to your point, as you practice that, Doug, like compound interest is a term that comes up for me. Like the more that you do it, the more results that you get from it, and the more little habits that you have. Shout out to Atomic Habits. You can habit stack these things, and this interest just builds and builds and builds.
Right. And closely related to that is something I do talk about a lot. As most of my listeners know, I do work with the Hogan assessments on personality and such. And one of the tenets of Hogan's guiding principles are that leaders have this conundrum. They have a sense of identity, and that's the story we tell ourselves. And you compete with your reputation. And reputation is the composite total of everybody else's experience dealing with you as a leader or human being for that matter. And if you learn that your reputation doesn't align with the identity that you want to create, there's an opportunity to do some work.
Yeah, 100%. I love that we're going in this direction, because ego works on identity. I think it's a Tony Robbins quote that says, the strongest force of the human condition is to remain consistent with who I think I am. So if I am this person, I will act in that manner, right? And so that's a scary place to be sometimes, because if I feel like I have to act a certain way because I am the leader, then I might be acting in a way that I feel forced to act instead of out of my heart. And so you want to be able to transcend some of those identities. And to your point, like maybe you can create new ones, But there's also the problem of people labeling you as the leader, and like there's things that you receive as people's perceptions of yourself, of who they think you are. I came across a great quote on social media yesterday. I think it was from Buddha. It says, "I am not who you think I am. You are who you think I am." So just this concept that we're all living different realities, and like you're constantly projecting out, and that's how the ego works. Realities that you think are happening that might not even be true for somebody else, but it's this blending and collisions of all these different realities that makes life so interesting. It's crazy, like how to, we can have a same situation, two people experience it and just have two wildly different realities of what's happening, and that's the ego talking. That's how the ego operates.
Yeah, I've read some fascinating studies that have been done about the biblical story of the Jews crossing the Red Sea and walking through the desert. Well, there was a study done by I think he was a supply chain guy, and he did the math on the number of people that were attributed to that story, and it's in the millions. And you think about a journey, a big giant cohort of people walking any path. If you're the front line of that cohort walking through, your experience is going to be quite different than the last guy that comes through.
Yep.
After everybody else has gone through before them. I mean, any combination of the trampling of the earth, the dust, the movement of things around them. And if you were to quiz everybody, there would be a million different stories of what really happened on that journey. And it's fascinating to think about that. But when I read that article, it made me think, isn't that true for all of us? I know if you're a parent, you want to try to teach your kids whatever journey you went on, their journey is going to be different. And to expect a carbon copy of what you might have gone through, and probably nobody knows what carbon copies are anymore, but it's a false expectation.
100%. And all that is, Doug, is the stuff that's coming up that's unaddressed. Again, no judgment, like but with parents, right? So there's constant patterns that are faced that happen in family lines, and the way that I might have experienced something as a child kind of sticks with me, and then I'll raise my kids that way, almost unconsciously, in the same way, or with the same values, or with the same guidance as my parents gave me. And again, like I said, I'm gonna drive this home. There's no judgment to that, but it's the awareness that there may be a pattern happening, and is there a different way? Are they experiencing a different reality than I might think that they're experiencing? And I may be trying to help them, and in the process, I might be actually, I don't know, limiting their experience as a child.
So let me ask you this, in the spirit of kind of trying to bring this to a close, is there a set of first steps a leader can do to kind of open the lens and begin the understanding of this dynamic of where the ego plays in and how to work it properly?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I don't believe the journey is for everybody. Now, there's probably a higher percentage of people that it's for leaders, because if you're a business owner, chances are you value your own development, your personal, your professional development. You want to grow, right? You want more money, more income, more time, more freedom, more of something, right? You're a driven individual. What I would say is just document or become aware of the story. So the ego works on stories. What is the story that feels really true for you? Okay, it could be, well, this employee is a difficult employee. They're making my life harder, right? And then so you can follow that trail. Well, what does that mean for me? That means they're taking up my time. Why is that frustrating to me? My time is valuable because, and you follow the story until you come to the root of what is causing you to react emotionally, and it will eventually lead to this truth. And I mentioned, I think maybe in my bio, that of truth seekers, right? We want to get to the truth of what's actually happening. And my mission is to get to the truth of everything. And it's a grand vision, but I'm slowly untangling it one thing at a time, by journaling, by self-reflecting. This is maybe the biggest thing that I'll share with the audience here, especially if you're a business owner. You're probably very busy. You have to find time to go slow. to reflect, to process, to vision cast. And all that can't happen if you're just hustle bustle, solving problems in the critical path of your business, of your organization. Much easier said than done. That's why we're here, right? To go get a business coach. But just understand the story, slow down and self-assess. And as you go higher, you'll notice that you're able to allow and to coach and to help your employees go higher as well.
Yeah, I like that, and I would say that in terms of tracking trends, if I've seen anything emerge post-COVID, I think there's a much broader and deeper sense of overwhelm that everybody's talking about. Business, the pace of business has accelerated yet again,
Yeah.
and it seems to incrementally keep clicking up the dial day by day. And when I am called to coach with a leader, whether they're in corporate, Fortune 500 type, or even the small business, to your point, there's this notion of it's just too fast. There's so many things, and I don't have time. And I do in my coaching, I push back on that. I call it the convenient excuse.
Mm-hmm.
That, guess what, my friends? Time you can't make more of, no, but you can be much more intentional about your use of it.
Mm.
And with intentionality, you make a commitment to create the time for what needs to be done. And the big rocks, so to speak, there's that great visual image I think Stephen Covey made famous with the rocks, pebbles, and sand. And,
Oh, yeah.
Dealing with the big rocks first, let all the other minutia, all the pings and clicks on our mobile devices, let that become secondary. And you'll be amazed at how, in fact, you still get to do all that stuff, but now you've really accomplished something with your big items, your big strategic priorities and needs. And it can be done. It is a choice that has to be made.
Yep. Yeah. And it's the releasing of control, right? Because there's a concept of if I do that, then I won't be able to do this, right? And that's just the story. But to your point, you focus on those big things and you do it consistently. All of a sudden, you notice these big results, and all the sand gets in anyway, right? Like the problems happen, and like this happens. But you gotta find those big rocks. What really drives things forward and ushers in changes for the company in a positive way.
Right. Well, Josh, this has been great, man. I really appreciate you coming in and sharing with us. Tell the folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more about your work.
Sure. So you can email me at joshua@proadvisorcoach.com. You can check out my bio and more information about me on the organization's website, proadvisorcoach.com. And Doug, something I'd like to do today, if you're open to it, I'd love to offer a free access to the mind scan assessment for anybody who was listening today. Was like, oh, that's, I'd love to take something like that. If we could put that in the show notes or have them email me, I would be happy to offer that for free, and then perhaps even do a free professional review of their results and how it applies to them.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. That would be amazing. And we do pack our show notes with those kinds of links if it is a giveaway. And I will definitely get that info from you, and we will drop it in the show notes, folks. So if you want to take advantage of Josh's gracious offer, this is amazing work. And I think I'll go back to maybe our keyword of the day, awareness, being able to, as a leader, elevate your own awareness of where you stand in the scheme of things, how your effort is showing up and impacting and influencing the folks around you, because, there are many definitions of leadership, but somewhere in the mix of all that, leadership is about influencing outcomes. So if you're sitting here scratching your head, not quite happy with what the outcomes seem to be, whether it's a small team or a small business, maybe you need to do some awareness exercises and see if there's some new opportunity there to up the game. But with that, Josh, one last time, thank you for sitting in. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, very pleasure-filled conversation here. I really enjoyed these topics. Thanks, Doug.
Good. Well, with that, folks, we're going to wrap this up. I do like to remind you, if you're listening on your favorite streaming service, we do have a video version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out our archives. And for now, we're going to sign off. Go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.